Dr. Patricia A. Edwards is a University Distinguished Professor of Language and Literacy in the Department of Teacher Education at Michigan State University, and one of the most honored and decorated scholars in the field of literacy education. Dr. Edwards is nationally and internationally recognized for her groundbreaking work on parent involvement, family-school community partnerships, multicultural literacy, early literacy, and family and intergenerational literacy, particularly among historically marginalized, low-income, and minoritized children and families. Over the past 4 decades, her scholarship has centered equity, access, and the vital role families play in children's literacy development. She has developed influential educational programs and published numerous award-winning books that highlight the strengths and assets of all families. Dr. Edwards has served on many prestigious committees and boards. She's a member of the Reading Hall of Fame and a National Conference on Research in Language and Literacy Distinguished Scholar. Dr. Edwards was the first African American president of the Literacy Research Association and also served as co-chair and president of the International Literacy Association. She is a member of the Michigan Department of Education's Family Engagement Stakeholders Task Force and was appointed by Governor Gretchen Whitmer to the Michigan Pre-K through Grade 12 Literacy Commission. Her service has been recognized with numerous prestigious honors, including the Literacy Research Association's Albert J. Kingston Service Award, the International Literacy Association's Jerry Johns Outstanding Teacher Educator in Reading Award, the Michigan Reading Association's Outstanding Teacher Educator Award, and the Literacy Research Association's Oscar S. Causey Award. She was a Jean S. Chall visiting researcher at Harvard and received the AERA Scholars of Color Distinguished Career Contribution Award at the senior level in 2019. In 2022, Dr. Edwards was selected as a member of the History Makers, ensuring that her life story and scholarly legacy are preserved in the Library of Congress as part of the National African American Historical Record. In 2024, she was elected as an AERA Fellow and received the International Literacy Association's William S. Gray Citation of Merit. This year, Dr. Edwards was elected to the National Academy of Education, one of the highest honors in the field, recognizing the enduring significance of her contributions. In this conversation, she shares a bit about this latest honor. So, Dr. Patricia Edwards, I'd like to congratulate you on your election to the National Academy of Education. Congratulations.
Thank you so very much.
Can you please tell our audience a little bit about the National Academy of Education and how this award will further your educational research pursuits?
The National Academy of Education is one of the most highly respected scholarly societies in the field of education. It brings together leading researchers from around the world whose work has made significant contributions to advancing knowledge about teaching, learning, educational policy, educational equity. And members of the Academy represent a wide range of disciplines, including literacy, psychology, sociology, economics, public policy, but they share a common commitment to using research to improve educational opportunity for learners across diverse communities. And being elected to the Academy provides scholars with an opportunity to engage in high-level dialogue with some of the most pressing issues facing education today. And the Academy supports research initiatives, policy discussions, and interdisciplinary collaborations that influence both national and international conversations. For me personally, this recognition provides a meaningful platform to continue advancing my work on literacy development, family engagement, and equitable literacy education. My research has long focused on understanding how children learn to read and how schools, families, and communities can work together to support literacy development. Being a part of the Academy of Education allows me to collaborate with other scholars who are committed to addressing similar questions and to contribute to broader conversations about how research can inform policy and practice. And ultimately, I see this recognition not only as a culmination of my work, but as an opportunity to extend the reach and impact of my research in ways that benefit children, families, and educators.
That is incredible. I'm so excited to learn more about your work with the Academy. This award is highly prestigious. What does being elected to the Academy mean to you?
Being elected to the National Academy of Education is both humbling and profoundly meaningful to me. When I reflect on my journey as a scholar, I think about my many mentors, colleagues, teachers, families who shaped my thinking and supported my work along the way. This recognition represents not only an acknowledgement of my individual scholarship, but also recognition of the collective efforts of the many communities I have worked with over the years. Much of my research has focused on ensuring all children, particularly African American children and children from historically underserved communities, have meaningful opportunities to become strong and confident readers. Throughout my career, I have worked to challenge deficit narratives about families and communities and to highlight the powerful ways that families support children's literacy development. And being elected to the Academy affirms this work matters. It signals scholarship that centers on equity, family, and culturally responsive literacy practices is essential to advancing our understanding of literacy development. And on a personal level, it is also meaningful to be a part of a community of scholars whose work I have admired over the years. And many members of the Academy are individuals whose research shaped my own thinking when I was a young scholar. To now join the community is both an honor and a responsibility. It strengthens my commitment to continue producing research that contributes to the field and, most importantly, improves educational opportunities for children and families. I have to tell you a little bit about this. I got started in this work probably over 30 years ago. And you remember back in 1908, there was a guy by the name of Edmund Huey. He says the secret of it all is parents reading to their children. And while that's a very simple teacher directive, it's a very complicated task for a lot of families. And so years ago, I received a W.K. Kellogg Fellowship. Those are the cornflake people in Battle Creek, Michigan. And they said you could focus on an area outside of your area of specialization. Well, my background, of course, is reading and language arts. So when I was teaching up at in North Louisiana, Louisiana is shaped just like a boot. I was teaching up at Louisiana Tech. At the end of student teaching, the students would always tell me and other faculty members there were two things that they wish we had focused on. They wish we had shown them how to work with families and children and deal with discipline. And so when I had the opportunity to apply for this W.K. Kellogg Fellowship, I decided to look at the family from a psychological, sociological, educational, cross-cultural, and policy perspective. And so a friend of mine gave me the opportunity to do some work with Head Start. Now, Head Start was a program that was started by President Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1964. It was a program for poor children. And so Head Start was that kind of program. So I decided to go and volunteer to work at the Head Start program in my community, which just happened to be down the street from my house. And there were 150 families connected with the Head Start Center. And so that's when I did my first major research study on this topic. And I said, first of all, I met with kindergarten and first grade teachers, and everywhere I've been to all 50 states and 54 countries outside the United States, and they all say the same thing: read to your child. I used to be the president of the International Reading Association, so they always say read to your child. But when we give that directive, we're assuming that parents know how to read to their children. So I went over to the Head Start Center, and I had 18 volunteers to participate, but I'm going to tell you quickly about 5 of them. So I had wordless picture books, picture story books, had all kinds of books on a table. And I said to the parents, I want you to pick a book and show me. I said, even though you're not from the state of Missouri, which is the show me state, I want you to show me what you would do if a teacher were to ask you to read to your child. This was quite eye-opening. The first parent came in, she selected the book Over in the Meadow. This parent couldn't read not one word in that book. Despite my coaching, begging, and pleading, she quit. The second mother comes in. This is a teenage mother, and she picked the book Great Day for Up. And she's asking me, what do I do? Now, mind you, before we got started, I said, do you read to your child at home? Yes, I do. I said, well, then show me. And this mother stayed the whole time, but she read the book extremely fast and made a lot of mistakes and said the end. Next mother comes in. She's moving the book very quickly, looking at where she had a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old. And I asked her the same question, and she picked the book Great Day for Up. And that was interesting. And she's read the book, and she was reading so fast, the student, her children could not see what she was doing. And I'm taking a look at this. Well, the next mother comes in, and she said to me, she said, well, for one thing, I do read to my child at home. And she said, but the teacher's always complaining that my child is not responding in school. So she picked the book, Why Mosquitoes Buzz in People's Ears. And she was trying to coach this little girl, and the little girl was not paying attention. And so she asked me to leave the room, and I did. And when I came back, she had spanked this little girl. And I certainly didn't want book reading associated with Pavlov and the dogs. And, you're not supposed to do that. And so I took that video of those parents actually doing what teachers ask them to do, which is read to your child. And I said, book reading might be a very simple teacher directive, but parents are not trained to be parents. And so even though they could hear what you were asking, they didn't know how to implement what you were asking. And so my probably one, and I'll send you a copy of this paper. One of the first papers I wrote was have attitude. It was about book reading and how we always give directives and we're making assumptions, but a lot of parents don't know how to read to their children. And Jo Beth Allen and Jenna Mason wrote a book called Risk Takers, Risk Breakers, Risk Takers, Reducing the Risk for Young Literacy Learners. And it was about this whole thing of early literacy, and I wrote that chapter. So one of the things that I concluded that we needed to shift from telling parents to read to their children to actually showing them how to do it. And so I ended up going down to LSU, and I did some work. One of my associate dean's wife was working in a little district about 40 miles from Baton Rouge in a community called Donaldsonville, Louisiana. Well, I didn't want to go to Donaldsonville, but anytime your associate dean's wife asks you to go somewhere and you really got a brain in your head, you ask how soon you want me to go. So I go down to Donaldsonville, and what I've discovered is when children are not doing well in school, it oftentimes boils down to race and class. I go down to Donaldsonville. It's a little small town, about 10,000 people. They had one elementary, one middle, one high school in that community. There were 726 children at this one school. 80% of them were low-income Black children, and 20% of them were low-income white children. All right, so 35 white teachers, 4 Black teachers, white principal, Black assistant principal, and there's tension there. So this is funny. Sometimes you have to make a joke out of things. So I go down there and I meet with the Black parents first. And so they're giggling. And what are you laughing about? They said, we thought you were going to be white. And I said, I am. I'm just pretending to be Black. I said, I said, illiteracy is odorless and it's colorless, and it will get anybody who has not had a set of skills. And I said, so they were saying he didn't like them because they were black. I said, well, what color you are is not a variable, and I can't do anything about that. But I can work with you around helping you to understand how to support your children. And I said, let me just tell you this, there are 64 elementary schools in Baton Rouge, and there are lots of those schools that are struggling. And at that time, I was an assistant professor. And so I said, I'm not down here to fuss with you. I'm down here to see what I can do to help you. All right. So I met with the white parents, and they told me the teachers didn't like them because they were poor. Well, now check this out. Okay, you went to college. I didn't go to college, but we might have known each other in high school. But if you went to LSU or Tulane or any other college, you have an education, and I don't have that skill set. So I reminded the parents in 1929 in America, we had the Great Depression. America didn't fold up and die because we had poor people. And I'm sure you know about March Madness, right? And where all
Yeah.
these basketball teams. I said, if we were getting ready to go down to the Superdome, nobody would be talking about who's black and who's poor. And so I said, what I want you to do is to value academics to the same level you value athletics. And so I had a town meeting, and
Mhm.
that's what I said. And I said, because I can't change what color you are, and I don't make enough money to give you any money. So we're going to figure out how we're going to get along and support each other. And I said, so for 8 weeks, I coached the parents, and I said, don't play with me. If you don't know how to read, then we can use wordless picture books, picture story books, environmental print books for you to support your child. I said, and I told them the story of when I was growing up, and I would go to the park. You can't get on the seesaw unless you have a partner. So I said, this is your child. You have your child for 17 and a half hours outside of school. The teacher only has your child for 6.5 hours. And teachers don't teach one-on-one. That's why you have one daddy and one mama. And I
Mhm.
said, so I took music for 8.5 years, and I participated in recitals. My teacher would know whether or not I practice. So I said, when I'm working with you, I expect you to go home and find time to practice. And so that program ended up getting recognized by First Lady Barbara Bush as one of the top 10 family literacy programs in the nation. And when I had a chance to meet her, I said to her that I was extremely happy that former First Lady Nancy Reagan had said no to drugs, but I was extremely happy she was saying yes to literacy, because literacy is a very important tool. And if you don't know how to read, it undergirds everything. And
Mhm.
so that was some of the backstory of how I got involved working with families.
That's amazing, Dr. Edwards. What an amazing story. And I love how you're able to connect with families and help convince them to participate and be full participants in your program. And I'm
Mhm.
sure that there's an ongoing positive legacy that comes out of that work.
Oh, yes, it was, because what happened is when I moved, I think one of the reasons we have a lot of struggles with students, like I went out just the other day, because this is March is reading month, and I read to preschool and kindergarten students, and they were so enthusiastic because I read Chicken Little. They liked that one. And then I read this book called Tuck Me In. And so then, like, do you want to go to bed? And then this little animal will say, tuck me in. And it's like, I do, I do. I find that children, I've never met a child that couldn't learn anything. Kids don't learn at the same level, but parents have to participate. If you think about it, if your child is in sport, whether they're in hockey or baseball, football, or whatever they're in, the coach gives you the dates and times for the entire year. I find that a lot of educators don't give parents what they want them to do at the beginning of the year. And we
Mhm.
assume, so we start, so they don't plan it within their schedule. And
Mhm.
so, what I have been arguing is just as we have a scope and sequence of the curriculum, we need a scope and sequence of parent involvement built around the curriculum.
Mhm.
Like, what does
Mhm.
it mean to be a kindergarten parent versus a second grade parent or a first grade parent? And that's what I did when I came to Michigan, was work at a professional development school. Because after I left Louisiana, I spent a year at the Center for the Study of Reading, and I worked in Chicago and also in Springfield, Illinois. And
Mhm.
so when I
Mhm.
came here, automatically people want you to do exactly what you did in Louisiana. I said, well, you can buy the program, but I have to do some additional work. So I worked at a professional development school for 4 years. And what I find sometimes is that schools, the population of a school might have changed, but teachers want to operate the way they did
Right,
years ago, which is
right,
problematic. Like the
definitely.
school where I worked for 4 years, it was in 1952 when the school was built. It was the whole community was white, and it
Mhm.
was the first time homeowners community. When I went there in 1990, it was a transient and
Mhm.
renters community. And so the teachers were trying to operate the way they did back then. That's not going to work. So we have to do, I always encourage schools to do a demographic
Mhm.
uh, profile of who you're dealing with,
Mhm.
because you wouldn't have a wedding unless you knew who was coming, and so you need to know who your clients are. And Michigan
Mhm.
is a collective bargaining state, so we have to figure out ways that you can get people to come during the day. And I know no matter where you go, people focus in on literacy. So the Chamber of Commerce always recruits businesses based on schools, right? So
Right,
then you go
absolutely.
and
Yep.
and you negotiate, and you say, okay, can we negotiate for employers to let their workers off once a month to come
Mhm.
and participate? People can do whatever they want to. They can send people to the moon. They can do whatever they want to. So you have to
Yeah,
figure out ways.
yeah.
And so one of the first things I did was to write a book called, just as I made the argument that doctors collect family histories,
Mhm.
lawyers collect depositions, architects collect a lot of information about our lifestyles. And because nobody's going to show you $1 million house unless you qualify for the $1 million house. And I said, well, we need to collect literacy histories. We always say that parents are their children's first and most influential teacher. Well, then let's ask information about them. So
Yep.
that's what I did.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so kids come in early, emergent, and fluid. I always have
Mhm.
parents laughing. If you go into the doctor and your cholesterol is 286 and you sit there with a straight face and tell the doctor you haven't had any fried foods, they know you're not telling the truth. So it's the same thing with me. If you've done all of these things, I should see this kind of result with your
Mm.
child. Then they tell the truth.
I'd like to make a connection here, Dr. Edwards. So I did my teaching in Texas. I'm actually from the US originally.
Mm-hmm.
And I taught in Central Texas in low-income schools throughout my teaching career. And I clearly remember my principal basically telling us, you can't really rely on parents to do much at home. We don't send home homework. You can only send home homework if the child has already practiced that skill like 5 or 6 times in class. And I do appreciate that. But I feel like she was very much at the far end of like basically saying, the classroom teacher's job is to educate the child, and we're not going to rely on families. And in a way, like I appreciate what she's trying to say, that we can't be expecting parents to, put in a lot of effort every week necessarily with making projects and doing, essentially teaching their child at home, right?
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, I feel like she also fully disengaged from
Yes, she
families and
did.
had no expectations for a parent's contribution. And in itself, that's a deficit orientation.
Yes, it is.
I'm wondering if you could comment on that.
Well, one of the things, in teacher preparation programs, we focus a lot on subject matter content, but we don't focus on. I'm not asking parents to teach what I teach in class. I'm giving an example. Sharing time was one of the focuses. Like the teachers told me that the children were not topic centered. Okay, so a little project that I did was to, because oral language is a precursor to children reading. So we came up with 32 topics. I'll send you a copy of that article. And what happened, we gave parents the dates and times for the entire year that their child would be expected to participate in sharing time.
Mhm.
And so we sent them tape recorders where they could tape the conversation with the child at home. And then we would tape the child's performance in school. Let me give you an example. One little girl. The topic was This Is Me.
Mhm.
She comes in class. Her name is Lindsay. And she said, Boys and girls, why do you think I brought this 5 pound bag of sugar in here with me today? They go, we don't know. She says, when I was born, I weighed 5 pounds and now I weigh 35 pounds. I have to watch my weight. And then she told a fact about herself when she was 1, 2, 3, 4. One little fact. And then at the end was a picture of her grandmother holding her. She said, what do you think my grandma is saying to me? And the kids were all excited. We don't know, Lindsay Lee. She said, welcome to the world. I guess what I'm saying is parents saw their children develop from caterpillars into butterflies. And I think parents are confused when they think that, if you ask the average parent, how does their child best learn? They say one on one. And my response to them is that's why you have one mom and one daddy. And that I'm not totally responsible for everything that happens in your child's life. Because if that were the case, then you would send me a child that's on grade level.
Right.
Literacy begins at home, not at school.
Mhm.
And so those children who come to school marinated and soaking in print, those are the kids that do well. So the question is, sometimes when I'm talking to parents, it's like Janet Jackson says, what have you done for me lately? So what have you done? I'm telling you what I'm doing, but the question is, what have you been doing? Because you don't tell the pediatrician, that's not my job. If the pediatrician gives you medicine to put in a child's ear, that's a schedule and they
Mhm.
know what you're doing. So I do think that people have a misnomer. And I think sometimes teachers say what you said earlier because they don't trust parents thinking. And they say, well, I don't have time to be bothered. I've given them this. But then I think a person needs to investigate why aren't they doing what they're doing because the project that I did in Louisiana at the end of the school year, we still had 35 white teachers, 4 black teachers, white principal, black assistant principal, and we had 80% low income black parents and 20% low income white parents, but we had changed perceptions.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's
So
almost,
important.
you know that movie called Hoosiers? Those
Mhm.
those guys were not supposed to be those tall African American guys, but you have to have a plan. And I only had $500 to run that project.
Right, right.
And so you
No,
have to
yeah.
get people together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a lot easier to have a deficit orientation about a family if you've never really talked to the family. You've
Hmm.
never talked
Or
to
you
them
don't,
and
or you've already made assumptions that they're not going to do anything. In fact, P.
that's
David
right.
Pearson and Barbara Taylor did a study called Schools That Beat the Odds. And these were all inner city schools. And you know what the variable was? Family engagement. Schools cannot and would not exist without parents. And they supply us with the children, but you can't choose what children you want to come into your school.
No, no, of course. Of course not. Of course not. No, I think we need to do more to build those bridges. And I think that our incoming teachers are not well prepared
Mm-mm.
to do that. I think they're a little bit intimidated. I witnessed that myself when I was a first year teacher, that I
Mm-hmm.
found my colleagues were not keen on doing the neighborhood. Like for the back to school night, we would do a tour of the neighborhood and bring posters around and hand them out to families in the community. And
Mm-hmm.
I found that my fellow teachers were quite intimidated by that simple activity.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember because I came to teaching a little bit later in my life, and I remember thinking, what's the big deal, right? What's the big deal? We just go say
Mm-hmm.
hello and we hand out these flyers and invite the families to school. So I do think that there are, yeah, unfortunately, many stereotypes and preconceived ideas, and
Mm-hmm.
also, or just a complete just lack of engagement.
Or
And
they'll
I
say
really,
things like, that's not my job. Well, then what is your
right,
job?
right,
And
right.
so I do think, like Michigan State's undergrad program in elementary and secondary, we brag about being ranked number one. But like I said, most of my students are white students. And I have been saying to my colleagues, students, we have to show teachers how to talk across race lines and class lines.
Absolutely.
And if we don't, and we don't need to tell good news if there's no good news to tell. But if
Mhm.
you tell news, I don't think, and I think that's why a lot of students end up getting to third grade and they can't read anything because
Mm,
people are not necessarily telling them the truth.
right, right.
And the truth might hurt your feelings, but it is what it is.
Yep. And telling the
And
truth is actually a sign that you care, I
that's
think.
exactly
Telling the
right.
truth, it's
And
actually
I
harder.
always, you're
Hmm.
exactly right. And I always laugh and say, would you want the doctor to tell you good news and you go home and die that night because you're black or you're white or you are Latino or whatever you are? I mean, you can be crying your eyeballs out, but doctors are going to tell you the truth. And I always say this, that everybody's family in some way have been touched either from a family member or a friend with cancer. And when you go in and talk to an oncologist, they're going to tell you the hard facts.
Yeah.
Even if you have a sick baby or whatever, they're going to tell you the facts. And I do think people do respect you more. And so you
Mm,
don't need to apologize for your personhood.
mm, mm,
And
I
people
love
can
that.
respect you better if you tell them the truth. And they
Mm,
might not like it. But I always refer back when we were growing up as children, our parents said some things that we didn't like, but we needed to hear. Like,
yeah.
bring me that car back here at 10 o'clock. Otherwise, give me the keys.
Right. Exactly.
Give me
Yes.
the
I,
keys.
I
Mm-hmm.
was talking to someone the other day, an educational leader, and I mentioned, the need for rigor in our
Mm-hmm.
programs and in our schools,
Mm-hmm.
and they said, "Oh, rigor, we can't use that word anymore." And
Well, I think that's problematic because for
Mhm.
the rest of your life, someone is going to be telling you something that you might not like. And I always tell people the day that you don't want to hear anything, that's the day you're going to be dead. And somebody's going to be trying to figure out why you died. I
Oh
mean,
no, yeah.
because I mean, that's just a part of life. You have to
It's true.
listen. And that's what mother used to always say, this is why you have two ears and one mouth. But I do think that we have to show people how to go in spaces and listen to other people's perspectives and points of view.
Yep, yep,
That's just a part of life.
yep. And build those bridges.
And
Absolutely.
build those bridges.
Mm,
Because let me give you an example. There was this teacher that I worked with, and she had been teaching for like 27 years. And I told her I wanted to do this quick little study where I wanted her to pick across race lines and class lines for parent teacher conferences and not to tell me who was low, middle, high, or whatever. And I said to
mm.
her, I'm going to be interviewing the parents right after the conference. The only parent she told the truth was the white parents. The
No.
black parents didn't believe not one word she said because
Oh my
her
goodness.
8-minute conversation was talking about fairness. Well, they knew she was the best teacher. And
Uh-huh.
I said to her, if you've been teaching 27 years and you having this difficulty, I'm teaching 21, 22, 23 year olds.
Right, right, right.
And so, and I said, and I let her listen to it. And they said, we know she's a good teacher.
Mm,
And we know she stretched the truth. And we wish that and that's when we went back and forth. She said, I would not want a doctor to stretch the truth. And teaching is a profession. People have argued, is it a science? Is it a profession? It's all of those things.
absolutely. I
Mm-hmm.
really like Zaretta Hammond's work, and
Mm-hmm.
she has this matrix about teacher warmth and their demandingness, and the profile that she argues is most effective is the warm demander. So the teacher who is kind and shows affection, but also has those high expectations, and it's in those classrooms that
Mm-hmm.
children learn. And
Mm-hmm.
we can't reserve that warm demandingness only for certain students in our class. It has to be for everyone.
Hmm. I'm not so familiar with her work, but I am familiar with Neil Nodden's work. She talks
Hmm.
about the whole notion of caring.
Mm.
But send me some information on that one because this
I
whole
will.
notion, like when even if you walk into a college level classroom, words matter in
Mm.
terms of how you talk and what you say to people, and not be passive aggressive, if you know what I mean. Some people
Oh,
say
yes.
nice, nasty comments, and those don't go over well.
I know. I know what you mean. And I think that we don't do enough in our programs to support these tough conversations and how to have them. It's like
Hmm.
bedside manner. I mean, I
Hmm.
think this conversation of, comparing to doctors and other professionals, you have to learn how to have the tough
You
conversations.
and lawyers the same way because I have some cousins that are
Mm-hmm.
lawyers and they will tell you whether you're going to go to jail for 15 years or what's going to happen with you, and you have to take it in. And my mother used to say there are two places for people that don't want to do what they're supposed to do. They will do it, and that's in the military, and that's when you're in jail. Those were rules
Right.
and regulations. You might not be an early riser, but you will learn to be an early riser.
Absolutely. You have no choice, right?
Hmm. And I do think, people have to learn, it's like when we first had to go to airports and you take your shoes off. Well, you either get cleared by TSA or you have to do those things. If not, you're going to be taken to the back room.
That's right. That's right.
Hmm.
You need to comply, right? You have to follow
You
the
have to
rules.
at some because if nobody, I always use the red lights, when you're talking to children. If all the lights from all directions came on green, everybody's going to be crashing into each other.
That's right.
And
That's right.
one of my former colleagues, Susan Rowan, used to always say that we need to have what we call hot lava conversations.
What's
Hmm.
that?
Well, that means a very controversial conversation where you let people understand. It's the same thing like I tell students. When you walk into a classroom, everybody might not know what you know. And so there are
Mhm.
things you have to set up rules and regulations. And I've said to them, why don't you ask each parent to tell you what they do with their child at home? Because a lot of parents don't have any rules, but school is rule bound.
That's right.
You
That's
start
right.
school at a certain time, you do this and everything. And some parents feel that their kids can do whatever. And no, 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 no. You
Hmm.
can't do whatever. Because
No,
you're not the only person in that classroom that needs to be accommodated.
that's right. That's
Mm-hmm.
right. Yes. And I mean, yeah, we have 20 bodies in the room or 25
Mm-hmm.
or 30,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to have rules or we have total chaos.
You have total chaos. And
Mhm.
like I always tell people, if your house is a no smoking environment, you don't care if somebody smokes, but they're not gonna smoke in your house.
So, Dr. Edwards, could I ask, with this award now and all of your accolades, what is next for you in educational research?
I'm gonna tell you two things. Number
Mhm.
one, I'm supposed to be doing a TED talk, and these
Mhm.
students are treating me like I'm a student, and they need to understand that I have a schedule. Like they wrote a mandatory meeting at 5 o'clock. Well, I'm not making meeting that meeting at 5 o'clock because I have somewhere to be at, and so I
Mhm.
said I can meet with you at 6:30 or 7. So at this stage in my career, I remain deeply committed to advancing research that connects literacy development, family engagement, and educational equity. And one of the areas that continues to guide my work is understanding how families and educators can work together to support children's early literacy development in ways that recognize cultural and linguistic resources that families bring to the learning process. And I do think people want parents involved, but they have not done it in a predictable way. Like some people don't want parents in their classrooms because they think they're trying to take over their classroom. But I
Mhm.
said that one of the things I call for in my paper that I'm sort of presenting is that for parents to insert their rightful role in shaping learning. And so when
Mhm.
I did that thing on parent stories, that's a way for me to understand better how to make connections with your child. And I said,
Mhm.
and currently I'm engaged in several projects that extend this line of inquiry. And one of these initiatives involves collaborating with colleagues on early literacy research that focuses on the role of families in supporting children's language and literacy development. And this work examines how educators and families can build meaningful partnerships that strengthen literacy experiences both in school and at home. Because I do think that a lot of parents don't exactly know what to do. And I do think that families have to be co-educators because they have valuable and intellectual resources that we might not have. And it's almost like when you go in, I'm gonna use that doctor metaphor. The doctor is listening to if your child has allergies or what things you have observed. And so I find that to be the same thing. And I remain interested in exploring how literacy instruction can be designed in ways to move beyond narrow definitions of reading and instead support children as thoughtful, engaged, and critical readers. Because sometimes we don't tap in to what children are interested in. And literacy is not simply about decoding words on a page, it is about understanding meaning, participating in conversations, and developing confidence to engage with the world. And another important focus of my work moving forward involves mentoring the next generation of scholars. I just had a meeting this morning before this meeting, and this young lady's from Indonesia, and she was talking about only 5% of the population speak English. And I kind of said to her, well, Americans normally don't go to countries where people don't speak English. And so they want to make sure that they can converse. And so she's thinking about some of those topics. I said, throughout my career at Michigan State University, I've had the privilege of working with extraordinary doctoral students who are now making their own contributions to the field and supporting emerging scholars, particularly those committed to advancing equitable educational opportunities that remain one of the most rewarding aspects of my work. And then ultimately, what continues to motivate me is a simple but powerful goal, ensuring that all children have access to literacy experiences that open doors to learning opportunity and participating in a democratic society. Because if children can't read, they don't understand the importance of voting and other kinds of issues. And I always say that, and this is one little sentence, I said, literacy is more than just a set of skills, it's social. I mean, if you're the kind of person that don't read nothing, what are you going to talk about? It is cultural, it is political, it shapes your identity, it shapes your voice, and it also shapes civic participation. And all of those things are important. And I always say that literacy is the bully in the curriculum, and people shouldn't wait till they come to school because you spent 48 months or 60 months. Is kindergarten required in Canada?
No.
Well, see, that's a problem. And it's not required here in Michigan, but people want us to like learn how to learn something about letters. People are always looking for that silver bullet. There is no
Right.
silver bullet. And now they've gone dyslexia crazy. And all children that can't read don't have dyslexia,
That's right. That's right.
which is problematic. And so I think in education, whether we're dealing with comprehension, because like when I went to graduate school at University of Wisconsin, Madison, and my advisor was Wayne Otto, and Wayne Otto had created the Wisconsin design. And I'm sure you know about the whole
Oh
language
yeah.
skill-based
Yeah.
argument. And Kenneth Goodman, of course, they named him the father of whole language. Well,
Right.
you remember that fight called the Thriller in Manila? I think they
Yeah.
had the Thriller in Milwaukee because when you got two alpha males arguing,
Oh.
Wayne said this, and it's true. You cannot understand the whole until you understand the parts.
I believe that.
And I do think that people that do research, as far as I'm concerned, if your research does not improve the levels of all children, I'm not interested in your little research study.
No, I agree with
And
you.
a lot of people have done research, Jean, but they've never taught. And you could easily
Mhm.
do something in a lab and it works. But then one thing about lab work, it has to scale up. And so if
That's
it's
right.
not scaling up, you know, as far as I'm concerned, I was in a little conversation with one of my colleagues and I said, but I'm Black. And so when you're telling me about your research and I don't see it having any impact on the population, then as far as I'm concerned, it's not using. I said, when I did that book reading program in Donaldsonville, I've been to Appalachia, I've been to
Mm,
Hispanic communities where they had to
mhm.
translate what I was saying as I was talking. To me, that is impact.
Right, right.
And I had
Of course.
$500.
Right,
I didn't have an IES grant with no significant results.
right.
Because people do
500.
all this stuff, they like overplan and
Yep.
everything. And I didn't have all that. I just went
Yeah.
in, had a conversation. Oh, by the way, I didn't tell you this. Um, I had the ministers preach from their pulpits about the
Oh,
importance of literacy because
wow.
South Louisiana is heavily Catholic and literacy is an important tool of faith. And if you can't read in school, you can't read in church. You're not going to have
Mhm,
lectors. You're not going to have
mhm,
Sunday school teachers. So, to me, school is a microcosm of society. So,
mhm.
whatever issue exists in society, it all comes to school.
Yep, I totally agree.
And
Yeah,
you know what?
yeah.
And I think giving kids experiences, a lot of students had never, a lot of children had never been to the zoo to see
Mhm,
animals. Hmm.
mhm,
But
mhm.
see,
Yep,
those are things that either church groups could do, take kids on field trips. I tell people if the only entertainment your child had was going to Disney World, then that's not going to be something for all parents.
that's right. Of course.
Mhm.
It's been a true pleasure chatting with you, and I
Yes.
just so enjoyed it and so much to learn from your work. Congratulations again on your award.
Well, thank you. All
Okay,
right, then. Thank
perfect.
you.
All
Bye
right.
bye.
Thank you.
Hmm.
Talk to you soon. Okay, bye.
Talk to you soon. Hmm.